Good evening, and welcome to tonight's Commonwealth Club World Affairs program, California Forever. Can building new cities help solve our housing crisis? Our guest is Gabriel Metcalf, Head of Planning for California Forever, and we're going to explore California's housing challenges and the potential role of new or so-called greenfield cities in addressing the state's critical housing shortage. My name is Karen Breslau. I'm a journalist, an author, and founder of Feature Well Stories. In my former role as California bureau chief for Bloomberg, I reported on California Forever. It's an ambitious and controversial plan to build an entirely new city from the ground up in Solano County, about 60 miles northeast of San Francisco. The story has all the stuff reporters like, so secrecy, billionaires, a culture clash, featuring some of Silicon Valley's biggest names, intent on bringing their vision to life in a quiet agricultural community, who never saw them coming. Looming over it all is the state's housing crisis and competing visions of the California dream, and that's a dream that's receding, as we know, for many would-be homeowners here. So we're going to talk about this moonshot approach to building housing and get the latest on California Forever from Gabriel Metcalf. Before we talk about the city that doesn't yet exist, I think we all want to take a moment and just recognize the tragedy affecting a great California city right now. We want to send our support to the people of Los Angeles and our gratitude to the firefighters and first responders. Now, I'd like to introduce Gabriel Metcalf. Gabriel is the head of planning at California Forever, a well-known city planner, very respected here in San Francisco, who has spent his career helping cities become more livable, sustainable, and inclusive. And before joining California Forever, he was CEO of Spur, right around the corner here, a prominent urban planning organization for the Bay Area. So Gabriel, welcome.
Thank
a lot
you.
of people are curious about California Forever, and I'm guessing that an equal number of people have opinions about California Forever. We're going to get to all of that, but I'd like to just start by hearing what got you interested in new cities in the first place. Take us there.
Yeah, great. Thank you all for coming out. We are tonight doing our part, aren't we, to help downtown San Francisco, as is the Commonwealth Club. And it just feels really good, just a conversation in real life, not on the screen. I really, I'm just a kid who grew up in the suburbs and dreamt year after year of escaping the suburbs and getting to the city. And when it was within weeks of moving to San Francisco that I discovered Spur by accident and started volunteering there and ended up working there for 22 years and becoming a city planner. And honestly, the way I feel about cities today is really the same way I felt when I was 14 years old, which is cities are the greatest. And the excitement and the energy and the mixing of all different kinds of people. I mean, it's a miracle. And cities have been around for thousands of years. They have worked a lot of different ways, but that concentrating of the human energy all together, that's the same as it's always been for thousands of years. Working in San Francisco and eventually Oakland and San Jose, working on kind of the practical, real-world problems. We had lots of wins, lots of losses, but over time, it really came to me to feel that one of the biggest problems, kind of underneath so many other problems, was the scarcity of successful urban places. And that those places where it's walkable, where you have you have jobs, you have the amenities, that because there are so few of those in this country, people are competing terribly to try to get them, and they're bidding up the price. And every intact urban neighborhood in this country got gentrified and got expensive. And it really came to me to seem that the root of the problem is that every one of those places already existed in 1900.
Name a few. Name a few neighborhoods that.
Yeah, so whether you're talking Williamsburg in Brooklyn, or you're talking the Mission in San Francisco, or Capitol Hill in Seattle, Georgetown in DC, Beacon Hill in Boston, all of these famous urban neighborhoods, beloved urban neighborhoods, only rich people can be in them now. And we've all kind of just come to know that. Oh, that's the way it is. You got to be rich to get into these good urban neighborhoods. And that is insane. That's just a complete failure of city making for that to be the case. And I think really the root of the problem is that if we're going to say that we can never again create a place that works that way, we are consigning ourselves that they will always be super expensive. And so I'm kind of walking you through the evolution of my thought that got me to think that the thing San Francisco needs most is actually for California to become capable of building new cities again. And it's actually the thing American cities in general need. We have to be able to do this again. And so I was lucky enough to get a chance to put that into practice, hopefully, with this project.
So why build a city from scratch? Why add water and stir and try to create the next, Cairo or Copenhagen or Melbourne, where I know you worked? Why not invest and bring the housing and the amenities and the walkability to the cities we already have that are struggling terribly in California, especially after COVID? Yeah.
Well, of course, we should be investing in the cities we already have. And that's what almost everybody's working on, is that. Mm-hmm. But we are short millions and millions of housing units in California.
So I think the shortage is estimated at 3.5 million units. That was in 2016.
Yeah.
And a fraction of those have been permitted over the last now 9 years.
So, I've worked most of my career on the problems of existing cities. I will surely do that again. Many of you will too. However, there is simply no way we can solve our problem entirely within existing cities. We will never, ever get there. And so, fundamentally, it's not a choice between channeling investment into existing cities and building new cities. We need to do both.
Okay. So how did you go from this love of cities coming to Spur and California Forever? How did all that happen?
Yeah, well, in between, I had a very exciting chapter, which is that at the end of 2018, I got to go to Sydney, Australia, and run a group there called the Committee for Sydney, which is a lot like Spur. And so I missed COVID. Spent it on the beach, sorry to say. But no, I was working very hard. But I had started a dialogue with the person who's now the CEO of this company. We'd been introduced several years before by a mutual friend saying, "You guys are both obsessed with new cities. You need to meet." And so, the timing worked out that this project was ready to launch. So,
okay, and so the CEO is named Jan Schramek. He's originally from the Czech Republic, came to the Bay Area, worked in tech circles, also went into the city creating space. You connected. What did you first think of when you heard, let's build a new city in the Bay Area? What were your first thoughts?
Well, so of course, when he and I were first talking about it was really exciting. But I thought I'd write some papers about it. I thought I might try to get a bill in Sacramento to make it easier. But he was thinking, I'm going to raise $1 billion and do the largest land assembly in history and actually make this happen. So that's why he's the CEO and I'm the head of planning. And while I was in Sydney, he in fact did that, and it's quite extraordinary.
And we're going to dive into the backstory and where all this land is in just a moment. But let's just start with a little definition. Like, what is a new city? Like, how do you distinguish that from a planned community? Or, I see places, not so much in the Bay Area, but when I'm traveling, they have cute little, like, faux downtowns with little fake cobblestone streets. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
What's a new city
Yeah,
versus a city-like space?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, to your point, most development in America every year is greenfield development, by far. And most development in California every year is greenfield development. And so the kind of initial...
Greenfield meaning bulldozers, new streets, new infrastructure.
Right, in a field or someplace that didn't have a city before. Mm-hmm. That's what greenfield means. In contrast to infill, which would be build on a parking lot or tear down one building and build a bigger building. That's infill. But most development is not that. Most development is greenfield. And the initial early insight of the new urbanists back in the 1970s was, geez, we're doing all this sprawl. If we could just smush it together into a more compact form and make it walkable, that would be better. And indeed, there have been hundreds of new urbanist towns that have been built. And I very much view our project as kind of standing on their shoulders and trying to take that further. The new urbanists have never had the chance to do something very big. And so I think one thing that makes it a city is the scale. And we're trying to get permission to build a place with room for 400,000 people, plus a commensurate number of jobs. And so that's just a whole different scale than what the new urbanists got the chance to do.
So cities evolve over time, right? Or centuries, millennia.
Yeah.
They have culture. They have natural features. They have functions of commerce and culture. How do you just wave your wand and invest the billions and go poof? There's a city. How does it have the texture and the culture of a real city?
Yeah, well, okay, I'm going to give two answers to this. The first answer is you don't. Okay. You accept that it will not be as interesting as a city that has evolved over hundreds of years. And to that point, if you have enough money to afford to live in San Francisco or Berkeley, then you are set. We believe, however, that there is a giant underserved population that would love to live in a walkable city, but cannot afford Berkeley or San Francisco. And so my first answer is that's a luxury problem. And we're going to be able to build a place that is much better than normal greenfield development, and just accept that it won't be as good as a older city. But my second answer is, which possibly contradicts my first answer, is we're going to do everything possible to accelerate the process of this place becoming interesting. And we have a lot of ideas about how to do that. And I would wager if we get the chance to build this, that it'll be a lot more interesting than you might fear. And some of that is physical planning decisions to allow it to evolve organically over time and become more and more interesting. And that's essentially having small parcels where buildings can be individually redeveloped by single owners, and not doing, I mean, no offense, but not doing like Mission Bay where the buildings are so big. Small parcel fabric. But also, I think we can do a lot in terms of investing in culture. We can do a lot in terms of public space, of creating an invitation for people to be enjoying public life and to be out and to be not just in private space, isolated. So I think there are a lot of things we can do that will accelerate the process of cultural evolution.
So let's offer some visuals. Let's start. Let's just take a look at where we're talking about here.
Yeah, great.
So let's just see.
Initiative we were thinking about running this year, but didn't.
We'll get to that too.
Showing the location. I think the key thing when I'm traveling other places, I just say it's halfway between San Francisco and Sacramento, and I think that's actually really significant because this concept of the megaregion, the Northern California megaregion, which is a really interesting kind of unit of geography, and the location is right in the middle of that.
Okay, so it's near the Delta, for those familiar with it, depending on traffic, about an hour plus northeast
Up here.
of here.
Yeah.
And there's a Google Earth view. You can see the proximity. You can see San Francisco, San Jose. So we're in the easternmost part of the 9-county Bay Area.
Yep.
Okay. And this is land that was actually scouted in the late 50s by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as they projected California's population growth. And the idea being that as the population spilled out of the central Bay Area, there were some likely locations, that the Corps of Engineers, the Department of Commerce, all these federal planners thought would be conducive to future growth, and this is one of them. It didn't happen at the time. So why that particular corner, and we'll get to the controversy, I promise you, and the backstory. But we just want to say where that is, and then here's the urban form that you're imagining. Could you talk about that?
Yeah. So this is a rendering of what typical neighborhood fabric might look like. The blocks are a bit like New York City blocks. There's a long side and a short side. Tends to be row houses on the long side of the block, and then apartment buildings on the short side. In this case, there's one big change to the New York block, which is there's an alley down the middle. So you could have either parking or an accessory dwelling unit or just a bigger backyard. And then you can see in the little blue, there's a bus rapid transit street in the lower corner.
And these buildings are about 4 to 6 stories.
Yeah, three to four are the row
3 to 4,
houses,
okay.
and then probably 5 under the apartments.
And what are the range of housing units in there? Everybody doesn't get a brownstone. We're not all in Brooklyn. I mean, there are flats, there are studios, lofts. What else?
Yeah, we're really committed to a full range. So rental and ownership, small all the way up to big. Apartments, small single-family homes, just every single housing type.
And there's going to be retail on these blocks, is that right? Or is it only housing?
There's going to be retail, mostly organized into shopping streets, in the traditional manner, like Valencia Street or Hayes Street. Telegraph, classic American shopping streets.
And then, as we can see here, the zoning is also very compact. So it's not a typical, 20th century American city that's designed for cars or that's designed around the assumption of vehicle traffic. Just walk us through maybe how the space is, this land that California Forever acquired over a 6-year buying spree is divided for different purposes.
Yeah, so the company owns at this point 65 or 70,000 acres. It's not all contiguous, but ish. And the urban footprint, the development footprint is 17,000 acres. Actually, that's the specific plan. The actual building footprint is smaller still, probably 11,000 acres. And so that's what you see here. This is the zones in the specific plan. Those of you who are involved in urbanist advocacy will know that there's a big move against zoning, saying don't have zoning. Turns out you have to have zoning in California, but we have made this be as close to mixed use as possible. So the yellow, we don't call that residential, we call it neighborhood mixed use because it has shops, you can run a business from it. As much as we're allowed to, it's very mixed use. One exception to that is the purple kind of diagonal line is the industrial zone. And that is a place where there's no housing. So you can unload trucks and be loud all night long. The streets there are more oriented to trucks. This is not just about housing. This is very much about, I think of it as a place for the Bay Area innovation system to actually be able to build things in the real world. So where you're not just doing software, you're not just doing coding, but you're actually building things, construction tech and aerospace, agri-tech. And so there's a huge focus on jobs, especially advanced manufacturing. And so that's what that purple area is. And then the big pink square is the downtown. And so far, they're letting us go up to 8 stories.
You also talked about transit, but again, unlike the suburban development of the 20th century United States, the idea here is to make this dense development around transit.
Yeah, very much.
And then somehow you have to connect the transit to Bay Area transit. And
yeah, absolutely.
As a planner, this is not a thing here. I mean, there are rail lines to nowhere. There's a Caltrain station that isn't connected to a BART, that isn't connected to a Muni or a bus line. So, like, coordination and knitting together is not a hallmark of Bay Area transit. So, and then you're adding a community that's going to be ultimately 400,000 people, and you'd like them, you'd like this city to be sustainable and have a low carbon footprint. How do you connect it to an already terribly fragmented transit system?
Yeah, okay, so there's a lot of questions
System is
there.
a generous word. But.
Yeah, so maybe the way I think about this is there's internal transit, so what happens inside the city, and then there's external, how it's connected to the rest of the Bay Area. For internal transit, we are going to have, we've got it solved. Internal transit is going to be incredibly effective. I would take a bet against anybody that it will have the lowest driving percent of trips of any city in California. Lower than San Francisco, lower than Berkeley, lower than Davis. It is being designed with basically a grid of bus rapid transit lines. So that means they're running on the surface, but in their own lanes, never be stuck in traffic. Fire trucks can use those lanes too, like you see on Van Ness. It's incredible.
I just want to say you said never stuck in traffic in California.
The transit. The transit
okay.
never.
Right.
The transit never stuck in traffic.
Okay, because I was going to say otherwise your population's going to be 40 million. So
it's got a brilliant bicycle network. It's incredibly compact and walkable with everything you need for daily life within walking distance. Very little parking. So it's a really transit and bike and ped oriented city plan. Now, external connections are harder. Mm-hmm. And they don't have to be harder, but they are because of what you said. We're in the middle of a very dysfunctional regional transit system. So we need BART and Caltrain and the Capital Corridor and other systems too, but I'll say those 3 especially for us. We need them to be working well. And so if this becomes a going concern, we are going to be putting enormous energy into coalitions to save and upgrade transit because we want to connect into those systems too, ultimately. Now, what we can sort of do at this point is basically run shuttle buses, which will be very nice. I'm going to put scare quotes on this, Google Bus style services to other cities. So to the Transbay Terminal, to BART, to the Vallejo Ferry, to the other cities in Solano County, to Sacramento and Davis. So we will be either funding or operating ourselves a very robust regional bus network. And to begin with, that's it. That's our external transit plan. And I think it'll be enough to get us going.
So we have a number of audience questions here. Somebody would like to know how long do you expect it to take to fully populate the new city? It has no name. It is called the new city so far. And how are you going to ensure racial and ethnic diversity? And we should also just say income
Yeah.
income diversity.
Yeah. Okay, well, to the answer of the first question, how long will it take? Well, of course, I don't know for sure, but I can tell you our projection is it's built out through to 2070. It could be faster, it could be slower, but that's what we're planning for. So a very long time horizon here. And I often say, there's thinking like a developer and there's thinking like a city planner. And, in this job, I'm doing both. But thinking about 2070, that's thinking like a city planner. You're designing systems for the long run that need to be flexible to all kinds of changes. In terms of racial and ethnic diversity, we have two really big advantages. One is that it's going to be much more affordable than the rest of the Bay Area. Solano County is much more affordable than the rest of the Bay Area. It's one of the great things about Solano County. I think we're likely to just pretty much match Solano County prices. I think we'll have to in the market. The second advantage we have is that Solano County is incredibly diverse. It's the most diverse county in the Bay Area. And so we're in a really good location where I think if we do a good job with this, we're going to benefit from all the great things that are present in Solano County today. And so a key to that is we have to deliver on the range of housing types so that it really is affordable. And specifically, I think we want to focus on middle income home ownership opportunities. So not the way they do it in San Francisco, where all the housing is expensive except subsidized housing. We want to do kind of the opposite approach. We want to really focus on middle income ownership opportunities for people who would never get a chance to own in a place like San Francisco.
Can you put some numbers? I mean, I know it's hard to project into 2070, but let's say the near future. Can you put some rough numbers on what, on a range of housing?
Again, with the very important caveat that it depends on how labor costs and materials costs and financing costs evolve over the next set of years. But we have a plan for a small single-family starter home that we could sell for $425,000 in today's prices.
And California, of course, has the highest average median price in the United States, which is currently in the 8s, in the 7s.
Sounds right.
It's about half the state average.
Sounds right. I don't know what the California number is.
It changes. So please don't tackle Gabriel on the way out. But let's talk about scale. So at full build out, you're anticipating that this new city would have a population of around
400,000 people.
So almost doubling the population of Solano County right now,
Correct.
Which is about 450,000. Which leads me to the next question. Why are local residents and politicians so against the project? Ask somebody in the audience, really in parens, question mark. Do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think that has changed. And I think I've been pleasantly, I don't want to say surprised, but I'll just say pleased to discover that we seem to be getting some traction. And I think, I think we did not have a great rollout, but I mostly think it took some getting used to the idea. And just with the passage of time, I think people have come to see that there is a lot of benefit for current Solano County residents in this.
And maybe we won't be so elliptical about the not great rollout. The fact is that in 2018, representatives of what we now know as California Forever began purchasing parcels of agricultural land in Solano County. Some were on the market, some were not. The acquisitions grew and grew and grew over a period of about 6 years. During which time, as this company called Flannery Associates, continued to acquire land, became the largest landowner in the county, nobody knew who they were. This was a stealth operation. It was a consortium of Silicon Valley investors, some of the biggest names around. Let's see, let's name a few. Mark Andreessen, Michael Moritz, help me. Reid Hoffman, Lorene Powell Jobs.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
So because some of the investors were famous,
Very famous.
that made people want to write about it.
Well, not only. Okay. Some of the investors were very famous. The local people, some of the landowners didn't know who they were selling to an entity called Flannery Associates. It was a shell company, eventually mapped back to your CEO, Jan Schramek. There was litigation. There were farmers. This land is dryland farming for the most part, wind power. It's for the most part rural. There is a sweet little city called Rio Vista, right there near the Sacramento River. There are other cities in Solano County. And there was litigation. Farmers who didn't want to sell were sued by this entity. The litigation dragged on for a long time. There were eventually settlements, but it wasn't love and harmony.
Yeah.
The local officials, both local, state, federal officials, were all trying to understand, what is this? What is Flannery Associates? There were concerns about national security. Travis Air Force Base is located, it's adjacent to one edge of the property. There were concerns, is this a national security threat? Is this a foreign power spying on the largest air base on the West Coast? There were all these questions that could have been answered at many points along the way and weren't.
Yeah.
And that led, when, let's see, that would have been summer of 22, I believe, the New York Times connected the dots and linked Flannery Associates with California Forever CEO and the investors. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, it's going to be a new city. It's not, any of the head scratching things.
Yeah.
That were
Okay. So let me just
pondered.
I'll give you my viewpoint on this.
Sure.
Any developer trying to do a land assembly, you can't say what you're doing it for. That has been done a million times. You think about O'Shaughnessy buying the land for the Hetch Hetchy water supply system, bought it up in secret. So whether it's for a public purpose or a private purpose, I think people now understand, that makes sense, that you would have never been able to get started and do the land assembly if you told people what it was for up front. That said, it created a really big problem.
Because of fear of driving up prices? Is it?
Because of what economists call the hold-up problem or the holdout problem. Yeah, you just wouldn't. People have the ability. They have the ability to veto the project by refusing to sell unless they get ridiculous buyouts. So to the point where you would never be able to afford to do it, and the project wouldn't happen, which happens all the time too. So I think there's no way this project could have happened except for assembling the land the way Jan did it. But it did create this problem, which was all along the way, we were not able to be briefing elected officials. And so they got more and more upset and in some cases embarrassed because they were spouting off about what they thought it was going to be and turned out to be wrong. And so we could have, we had a lot of work to do, I would say, to repair relationships with elected officials who were blindsided. And I think had the story not leaked in the way it did, it would have been better for us. There would have been more people who got a chance to get briefed before the story broke. And, it was a calculated risk. I do think that in the year since then, a lot of those relationships have been repaired, and I think you're going to see some pretty positive movement this year, which is not to say that everybody's going to be on board. I'm sure it'll be a big debate still, but I think it's going to be, I think people have been willing. I mean, I'm really appreciative of this. People have been willing to give us a chance to prove ourselves and to work on those relationships. And there just is so much value for Solano County and for California, frankly, for America, that can be created here. It can solve so many problems. So at the end of the day, that is attractive to elected officials.
Okay, so we won't go too much further down the backstory. People can look it up if they're interested, but we don't want to leave any mystery here as to why this, was so controversial. There was also a need to rezone the county, right? Solano County has an orderly growth measure that was in place since the 1980s, ratified several times by voters.
Yeah.
It's a county, it's much less dense than obviously San Francisco or the nearer Bay Area counties. There is still a lot of agriculture. The cities are small by design and by voter ratification. And you were headed for a ballot measure last November that seemed unlikely to pass. There was a lot of controversy. The ballot measure was pulled. I will note the day after Joe Biden dropped out of the race in July. So that was a very busy news day, and it was well played for you guys. And since you've gone back and now you're working with the county.
Yeah.
So what's going on? What's happening? What's changed?
Yeah, well, the president of the Board of Supervisors and the CEO of the company reached an accord and I did not connect the dots that it was the day after Joe Biden dropped out, but that day.
That was my yoga retreat, so I remember that day very well.
That day put out a joint statement saying where we agreed to withdraw the ballot measure and to work with the county on a more normal approach. I'm going to put normal, put that in quotes.
What does that mean in California? What's normal?
But and by which I simply mean we're now talking to the county every week, and we are working through all of the details together, and we have a lot more to go, but it feels much better. We're looking at plans, we're solving problems, and we're not going straight to the voters. We're working with the county staff very closely.
So could you talk a little bit about the process and the timeline from here out? There's Travis Air Force Base, which one questioner wants to know about. You need to protect Travis. There are ecologically sensitive areas. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the bay.
Yeah.
There's grazing. There's wind power. How do you, what is the process, and when do you start alleviating the housing shortage in California?
Yeah. When can you move in? So we are working toward a pathway of writing a plan, doing an environmental impact report on the plan, and then ultimately having the Solano County Board of Supervisors put it on the ballot. So this is all in the statement that Supervisor Mashburn and Jan Schramek jointly put out, working toward a November 26th election. It is still possible that we could together decide to do other approaches. It could be a different year, it could be a different approach, but my marching orders are have an EIR ready to be certified in time for the November 26th ballot. And so that is what
Environmental
I'm working
impact
on.
report.
Correct.
November of 26, when could you potentially break ground, and when might somebody be able to buy one of these $425,000 units?
Yeah, I'm going to say we could break ground in, gosh, does somebody here remember the year we said the first move-in is? Is it 2029 is possible? I'm sorry.
So later, maybe by the end of this decade.
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay. But you'd be starting small, right? I think the first
Right.
phase is around 10,000 people.
15, yeah.
15,000 people. So we've got some really interesting audience questions here. In light of the LA fires, and in light of the fires we've seen in Northern California, how can better city planning help, maybe not curb climate change, but protect cities and housing
yeah.
from climate change?
Yeah, well, I think that's quite profound question. We are fortunate enough, I don't know if there's a good map to show this, but maybe not. This site is a climate refuge. There are no trees, essentially. So it only could be, there's no chaparral. It would be, the only thing that can burn in the area is grass. So pretty easy to manage that through just good land management practices. It's out of the way of the worst case sea level rise scenario for 2150. So it's in much better shape than like San Francisco for sea level rise. It does not have any major geologic faults going through it. And so it's quite ideally located from a natural hazard and climate change perspective. I do think, I happen to think this is something that humans need to do multiple times. We're doing one version of it. But one of the reasons why I believe that so strongly is that if you look at where sea level rise is going to be causing displacement in the world, there are going to be hundreds of millions of people who are displaced. And if they are not just supposed to go into favelas or UN refugee camps, we collectively, we humans, are going to have to figure out how to do this, how to build places where people can move to. That is going to be a gradual process, hopefully, if we're lucky enough, so we have some time to get ahead of it. But I very much view this as a prototype of something that many countries are going to need to figure out.
Speaking of other countries, one questioner says that Shenzhen, across from Hong Kong, is a fantastic new city. And how does your new city, California Forever's new city, compare to other global examples?
Yeah, Shenzhen is like the great outlier. It's, I don't know, whoever asked that question, is it 30 million people now? And indeed, planned as from a tiny village, so essentially from scratch. I think most American urbanists would not probably idealize the placemaking and urban design of Shenzhen, but economically, it's emerged as one of the absolutely most important centers of economic activity on the earth. And I think it's a really interesting model. There is sort of a truism about new cities. There has to be a reason for people to go there besides the city itself. We are going to be within the Northern California mega region, so incredibly economically dynamic, incredibly underhoused, struggling to keep up with population pressures. California is displacing millions of people to Texas and Arizona and Nevada. So we are in a place where there is demand because it's California, because it's Northern California. Other capital cities are another example. So Washington, D.C. or Canberra in Australia are new cities where the purpose was that the national government moved there. But when you try to sort of dream up a new city in the middle of quote unquote nowhere is nowhere. But if there isn't a reason to get people there, they struggle. So I think Shenzhen really proves that.
Somebody asked about Brasilia. Are you taking any lessons from Brasilia, the
No.
administrative capital of Brazil? No. Okay. All right. What about Neom?
No.
Okay. All right. That's Saudi Arabia's Fantasia.
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of when you think about new cities, they the ones that are famous, tend to be pretty fantastical, and they don't always get built.
Oh,
Quite often they don't.
Most
Most
new
of the
city
time they
proposals
don't.
never happen.
They don't. So what makes this different?
Well, again, it's in the Bay Area, which is desperate for a pressure relief valve where a place that will say yes to growth and development when so many of the other cities in the region have said no to development or have, in effect, put in rules and requirements that have made it impossible for development to happen. The Bay Area desperately needs a place that will say yes, and so we can provide that. We also have, this wasn't dreamed up by just city planners. There's actual business people who are backing this project. And so I think we
Are you
have
talking about investors, or are you talking about?
talking the CEO, the investors, other people on the team. And so this isn't driven by legislators or city planners like me or academics saying it should happen. This is driven by people who actually have the ability to line up the investment to make it happen. So I think if we get permission to build it, we will be able to build it.
Is there a price tag? What does it cost to build a city?
Yeah, I don't know yet. Good question.
Okay, that's a great question.
Fair
Yeah.
question.
Fair question. Okay.
Ask me in a year.
Okay, I was going to say,
Have
how
me
many
back.
zeros? All right, so
Yeah.
$1 billion in land.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, have me back in a year, and I'll
okay.
give you a number.
All right. Well, I'd like to know how many zeros. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. A question from the audience, and if you have questions, put them in the chat or send your cards up. How do you prioritize the phasing in of the development, especially infrastructure such as schools, parks? I mean, I assume these are, you want a walkable city with kids and families.
Yeah, it's a
parks?
great question. Yeah, so the schools plan, we are building 70 schools, which includes 11 major high schools.
At
and-
full build out.
At full build out, and tons of parks. And yeah, the phasing plan is actually really important, and we're starting to work on that now. Day one, when you move there, when you're like the first 10 families, you need some stuff, right? You need some stuff to make it livable. Which means you have to deliver some of those amenities, some of those services early, before there's a full population to support them. But you don't want to deliver it too early, or you can't afford to do it. So you have to be delivering the amenities and the services just ahead of when they're needed. And so this whole kind of ratcheting up of building, water treatment and parks and roads and early retail, and it all has to kind of grow together. Now, once you have the first phase built, which we think of as 15,000 people, kind of a good first neighborhood, then it becomes way easier because the next people can kind of use the amenities and the services in the first neighborhood while they're getting built up. So it's this kind of cold start problem is most acute in the very first phase, and then it becomes much easier.
One questioner wants to know how the long-term operation and funding works for a new city. Cities
Small
are not
question.
only expensive to build, we know from San Francisco with its soon billion-dollar deficit, they're really expensive to operate.
Yeah. Well, one thing is the residents and the employers in the new city will all be paying taxes, and they will pay taxes to support things like police or social workers or firefighters. That's one thing. Some of the kind of life support systems, like think of it like electricity. Utilities send you a bill every month, and you pay for the electricity you use, and they use the money they collect from you to build out the systems. So it ends up being a quite nuanced answer where each system or each service has a different answer for where the money comes from. There is a very important funding source in master planned communities called a Mello-Roos district or a community facilities district, which is basically it's basically an extra property tax. So an extra 1% up to that every resident pays every year. That is one of the most important funding sources for especially capital costs to build a new city. And then of course the developer pays for a lot of it and then hopes to get that back on the back end.
And what's the energy profile of this new city? Is it all renewable? Is it mostly renewable?
Yeah, I hope it's going to be all renewable. We're going to have a giant solar energy development business. We're still working on the energy model. So,
Is it going to be a net zero community? Is that, are you that ambitious?
we're not slinging that term around. That's a bit of a contested term, how you define that. But I think we will be able to power the entire city with renewable energy on land we own.
Okay. This is interesting. Is there an idea to start an all-new immigrant city? This person says as a way to solve the problems of refugees.
All right, I have a lot of opinions about this question that don't totally relate to what we're doing, but clearly immigration to this country is like the magic that has made this country incredible. And something is going wrong. I mean, I'm editorializing here, but something's really going wrong where the whole point of America is to be a place where people can come from all over the world. I would submit that the difficulty adding housing, the difficulty creating places for people is one of the contributors to why this has gotten contested in America. So I would submit that if YIMBYism becomes triumphant in America, it's going to, at least on the margins, help lower the temperature on the debate over immigration, because everyone can be confident that there is a place for people to go, and we can just expand the housing supply if more people come, no problem. I do think that there's a long tradition in America that new arrivals to this country get work doing services for people who have been here longer, who have more money. And that has looked a lot of different ways in a lot of different periods of time. But so isolating immigrants in a separate city would deprive them of the chance to earn a living doing things for the people who are already here. So I think in general, it would be better if immigrants could be welcomed everywhere.
So on Monday, in addition to being Martin Luther King Day, it's also Inauguration Day. President Trump has talked about freedom cities.
In the Presidio, I heard.
But there has been an interesting meeting. So I don't know if it's the back end of the horseshoe or how you want to describe it, but there are YIMBY advocates on the left and the right who seem to have come to some sort of agreement that housing can be a nonpartisan issue, that there is a desperate shortage of affordable housing in this country and certainly in California. Is there some way to transcend partisan politics and build the immigrant-friendly, inclusive, more affordable, more walkable, sustainable, all the stuff that you like with the freedom agenda of a family's right to own a home?
Yeah, that is
Not right, expectation, the American expectation. So
that is
is
such
there
a good
such
question.
is there some way we can all get along?
I would love to be optimistic about this. What she said, that sounds pretty good.
And Freedom Cities, I should say, is the idea is to build on federally owned land.
Yeah, so I don't
sidestep the various zoning and restrictions.
I don't know anything about that proposal. I don't know if it's a serious proposal, but the idea that there could be a few topics where both sides find common ground and actually do something constructive, and if one of those could be housing, wouldn't that be incredible? I don't know whether to be optimistic about that or not, but yes, hopefully.
Hopefully, okay. All right, here's somebody who took a little issue with when you said not Mission Bay, going back to San Francisco. Sorry. I love Mission Bay. You used the phrase small something fabric.
Small parcel.
Small
parcel
fabric. Can you tell us what that term means?
Yeah, so sorry, planning jargon. Okay, for those of you does everybody here know where Mission Bay is? And then
it's right here in San Francisco.
And then right behind it, right to the south, is Potrero Hill. Potrero Hill, the lots are 25 feet wide, and each building tends to be 25 feet wide. That is a small parcel fabric. The parcels are small. You can tear down one house and build a different house if you wanted. Newer buildings tend to be bigger, like horizontally. I don't mean taller necessarily, but each parcel, each piece of property is bigger, and that would be a large parcel fabric. And yeah, this is possibly subjective. I think Mission Bay did a lot of things right, by the way, and I worked on it a lot. I worked on it for 20 years as a policy advocate, and I think it's coming in much better than could have been hoped. But it's really part of why the 19th century urban neighborhoods are so well loved, and they're just like the greatest neighborhoods, is many more buildings. It's just more interesting. It's more interesting to walk down those streets. And different architects, different developers, different ideas about style, and that kind of eclectic fabric of lots of different buildings is really nice. So that's all I was saying.
Okay, all right. Well, the Mission Bay fan club is mollified. Is on you. All right. I'm wondering. Cities are struggling terribly right now. I mean, San Francisco, Oakland, cities around the country. You're talking about this new city, new homes, parks, transit, but cities are filled with people. People have problems. So how are you going?
Everyone's going to be happy in this city.
Yes, and there will be
all the
bluebirds
time
and rainbows, and it's going to be awesome. But how do you build a new city and either avoid or minimize or eliminate just some of the awful stuff that we see on the streets of existing cities? And I'm referring to homelessness, to substance abuse, to people in having mental health crises.
Yeah. Yeah, people are people.
People are people. They're gonna people, and they're gonna live in your city.
There's going to be heartbreak and strife and failure and disagreements and all the other hard parts of being a person. And there's going to be cops and social workers and firefighters and paramedics who are trying to help backstop for when things go wrong, just like any other city. And there's not going to be any gates. In the end, it's going to be just like every other place. It's going to have all the mix of the things that people do.
To get back to the question of why people, why there was so much controversy around this project, there was some early language around, possible, experimenting with new forms of governance, and maybe not your project, but new cities. There is this strain of technotopias, seasteading and escaping, the surly bonds of government. Period.
Yeah,
but that's not what's happening.
That's not what we're doing, and we are part of Solano County, and we will be using all the normal forms of government that California cities have. Yeah.
Does California Forever envision, as you build out this project in Solano County, if you get the approvals from the county, more such cities in California?
I sure hope so. Mm-hmm.
Is this a template for something?
I mean, we're doing this one. I hope California, I hope the United States, I hope other countries do other new cities. Right? We're doing this one, but I would love to think that this inspires other people, prototypes some things that other people can adapt and copy.
Okay. Well, this is interesting. What additional sites for new cities are the investors researching in California? So that's.
I don't.
What do you got there?
I don't think that's happening. Not to my knowledge.
No, there's not another little posse of tech billionaires.
I haven't heard of it. I haven't heard of any.
At this time?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting question. All right, so here we're coming back to, I think, kind of your, original problem. What is the significance of a group of tech billionaires taking charge of centrally planning a project, a city building project at this scale? Historically, cities are centrally planned by the state, or they accrete slowly in a bottom-up way.
Well, the investors are not planning the city, for what it's worth. But I think I take your point as, what does it mean when the initiative for a project like this comes from not from the government, comes from the private side? Well, one really good answer is, let's have the government step up and do the next one and do it better. And I would love to see that, right?
Which government?
I think that was about the state of California, as I heard the question. Mm-hmm. That would be amazing for the state of California to do the next one or do the next several, and then we can, and maybe they'll improve on it.
What are your, I guess, and I'd like to build on that question about the investors. Investors expect returns. Most cities are bleeding money right now, right? They're just we see that in San Francisco, we see it in Oakland, God knows LA, but cities are just haven't churned a lot of profit in the last decade. So what do your investors expect?
If you widen the scope a little bit, there are all kinds of cities in the United States that are in the middle of development booms. Houston and Dallas obviously are, Atlanta. But lots of cities are having incredible boom times, and the things being built are being built by developers who are trying to make money. Mm-hmm. They're not charities either. California has tied itself in knots and made it virtually impossible to build anything. It's impossible to build high-speed rail. It's impossible to build energy transmission lines. It's impossible to build normal transit. It's impossible to build housing. Many of the very same things that hobble housing construction also hobble public transit construction or energy construction. We have made it so that we cannot build things. That is what we have to change. We are fighting the fight for one big project. Wherever we can, we would love to be part of a broader political coalition, making it easier for California to build in general. We will be much more successful if we are inside a state that is successful. But I really think it's time for, I guess what I'll call blue America, the parts of America that vote Democrat, to take a look in the mirror, and we have ourselves to blame. We have set up a system of government that has created these problems where we cannot build things. And so we've got to change that.
Well, that is all we have time for today. We're going to leave it at that. Gabriel Metcalf, Head of Planning for California Forever.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for your time and your insights. Thank you to our audience. Thanks to our audience for joining us and for your thoughtful questions. The Commonwealth Club World Affairs invites you to become a regular attendee at future thought-provoking programs like this one. Become a member for special benefits and support the club's mission of fostering vital civic education, engagement, and dialogue. To find out more, please visit www.commonwealthclub.org. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you again soon, and good night. Thank you.